Hello, we are live. Hello, Isopod keepers. How are you doing? Hello, Nanette.
Hello.
Did you notice my shirt?
Yeah, it says America.
I have it says what? Supreme Gecko?
Aquarimax Pets.
I have no idea why I chose this shirt. You?
I don't know why I chose this one either.
We have,
maybe because it has leaves and flowers.
Well, we kind of balance, it's kind of flowery
we
compared to the, Johnny Cash kind of look at that I'm sporting here. We have some amazing guests tonight, and this is going to be fun, folks. This is kind of a part one. Is that you? I thought that was a dog.
Yeah, you just kicked my foot. That's
Sorry
okay.
about that. This is going to be a fun one. This is part one. This is the beginner version of a panel discussion about isopods. We're going to talk about some things that I think if you're starting off, and maybe if you've kept isopods for a while, I think this is going to be, there's going to be some key questions in here, and certainly, absolutely some key answers. And our panel, I tell you, I am so excited. I mentioned just before we started here that I thought of an idea to bring a panel together and talk about differences. And I tell you what, we're going to all be thick-skinned, and this person might have a different idea than I have. We're just going to run through it, and we're going to share, and nobody's wrong. No, we're going to share our experience. But this panel is some of the coolest people that you'll ever meet. And I'm going to bring them on in just a second. Again, this is part one of hopefully 3 parts. This is more beginner.
Really?
Go ahead.
Really?
This is part one beginner. We're going to eventually have, or hopefully very soon, have an intermediate and then an advanced question and answer. I probably won't be in that advanced because I don't, I go a certain level and then I just kind of stop. You want to check out who's here?
Frank the Tank is here. J-Bug is here. I never say this right. Isopods is here. Kate is here.
I say Steve-O.
Animals VT. I was thinking Michigan is here. Laura's here. Crazy Bugs and Pods. Jen Lee is here. Supreme Gecko's here. John's here. Major WD is here. Misfit Farms is here. And I'm thinking that's all I see so far. Am I too loud with the mic right here or not?
I think you're okay. If you can do some clicking sounds or something like that, you can have everybody kind of test it out and see how that is. Yeah, Steve is saying just do some leaves into the maybe he's saying something else. Yeah. Mentioned that this is a beginner. Nanette's going to be the moderator here, and this is kind of like the Mount Rushmore of isopod keepers. And there's no offense to anybody else out in the isopod world. I know that there's some huge names and great isopod keepers out there, but I looked at this list and I put together the thumbnail. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like Mount Rushmore. Now, I'm Teddy Roosevelt, and why Teddy Roosevelt is on Mount Rushmore when there are so many other great presidents, I have no idea. But yeah, I'm Teddy.
Okay.
But
hi, Cassandra.
Let's get to it here.
And Barbara.
I am going to introduce these special isopod keepers, and this is going to be fun. The first person that I want to introduce from Aquarimax Pets. Hey, I know that place. I'm going to steal a line from my good friend Josh from Isobuddies. This is the Bob Ross of the isopod world, and I am so happy to bring on Rus Wilson. Rus, how are you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thanks, Nanette and Wally, for having me today.
Thanks for joining us. Our next guest, how can I come up with a similar introduction to Rus? I think I can. So this is one of my special friends. She's so nice. It's incredible. It's so fun to see her posts on Facebook. I would call this person the Martha Stewart of the isopod world because she's so nice. Okay, forget about the jail time. Let's not consider the jail time. And let's go ahead and throw out the whole Snoop kind of relationship there. But a special friend, Rachel, how are you doing?
What an introduction. Thank
what an
you.
introduction.
Hi, I am great. I am already having a great time. So
this is going to be fun. We're going to get serious with some of these questions, but gosh, if you don't know me by now, I like to have fun and just play around and joke around and make it light. Our next guest speaker. Oh my gosh, what do I
It's
say about Chris Biggs, the Mad Aquarist? What can I say about him? Well, this is probably, I can think of a couple of names that I can associate to Chris Biggs. One is I started listening to this guy a long, long time ago, social media guru, Gary Vaynerchuk. So I look at Chris as a Gary V just from a personality standpoint and so outgoing. If you don't know Gary Vaynerchuk, look him up later. But you will know this next name. I look at Chris as the Billy May of the Isopod world, Mr. Infomercial himself.
Oh, he has a hat.
There you go.
Got my hat, got my silly hat. If you're going to wear a silly hat, I get to wear a silly hat. Mine's Canadian. There.
I'll take
nice.
mine off if you take yours off.
You've
No, I'm
never
not
taken your
I'm not
hat
taking
off.
my hat off. Sorry. How are you doing, Chris?
All good.
Good.
Hot.
Russ,
It's insanely hot here. We don't have air conditioning, so it is what it is.
I'm dying here. Russ, why don't you give us a little introduction on who Russ really is? What is a Aquarium Pet?
Okay, well, start out, I guess, I'm that kid who was found at 18 months old with a pocket full of worms. So I started in the invertebrate hobby early, but I never limited myself to invertebrates. I've always been interested in them, but reptiles, fish, birds, I've kept a wide variety of creatures, worked in a couple of zoos, and have had an amazing time in the last 10 years or so with isopods.
Outstanding. How long have you been keeping isopods? Give us a little bit of something to kind of level the discussion.
Okay, well, well over 30 years ago, I started keeping aquatic isopods. But then, and as a kid, I was keeping them and kept them, bred them successfully for a while, and then kind of moved on to other things. Got into marine isopods in around 2004, 2005, was keeping those saltwater isopods. And then about 10 years ago, I started keeping terrestrials.
Nice. Rachel, give us a little bit of a history on Rachel and pet peds and pods. Tell us about what you're doing.
Sure. Hey, I'm Rachel. I own Pet Peds and Pods. I was also the weird child with all of the bugs everywhere and reptiles and amphibians. Grew up with all of that. We've got basically a zoo here now. My husband and I own a hobby farm, and so we have goats and a very spicy goose named Bluey and a duck, which many of you have heard about. And I've been keeping isopods, like actually keeping isopods to keep isopods, probably since 2016, 2017. I started the business in 2019, so give me an idea of that. But I've been keeping, reptiles and amphibians and vertebrates pretty much most of my life.
Outstanding. And it's hard, you say since 2019, that sounds like such a short period of time, but it's really not. That's a long time in the isopod world.
Yeah.
Crazy. Chris, tell us a little bit about the Biggs man.
I got a leech.
You going fishing?
Yeah, we caught it in the dugout just the other day, and I was just going to play with it. I did a couple of videos on a leech a couple of years ago entitled Larry the Leech, and people kept asking for updates all the time. So we found a leech in our dugout. That's where we go swimming in our natural pond. We found one. So he's been in a jar for 2 days. I just thought it was funny when Russ mentioned a leech. My background, when it comes to isopods, my background is not lengthy whatsoever. It came during COVID. It came in organic fashion, but my background is mostly academia and mostly botany, which is plant studies, and fish studies, which is ichthyology. But my passions were always more either fish studies or reptilian studies, primarily venomous. So I kind of came across isopods, as they say, in an organic way. I ended up actually having a customer. I'm a national sales manager or a territory manager with a pet supply company up in Canada. So I have customers across a certain section of Canada. And one of the customers that opened up a store, we were talking, and we knew each other from years ago, but we'd never seen each other before. And we were both members of the venomous community. Venomous, a lot of stuff back in the day was very illegal. It still is today in certain spots. It was a very black market, and you didn't advertise what you had and so forth. But mine was always for the fascination and the study. and he ended up having a venomous room in the back of his store. And he ended up having a monocled cobra that he kept bioactive using isopods and springtails and earthworms and things like that. And that's how it came to be for me, because anything that's going to be a new form of academia, something that I could pour into, that's where it is. Now my passion is not as much the isopods. I don't have anywhere near like some of the other people. I'm a bit more controlled like Rus, the limited amounts that we have. But my interest is more in looking at the ecology of the forest floor and actually breaking it down like I did in that video we just talked about the other day about the soil substrates and so forth. Is that enough?
You guys all have special superpowers. And, I look at Rachel and I think, you're just the nicest person in the world. Just, I see your posts on Facebook, like I said before, just the nicest person. Rus,
Ronnie never said that about me, ever.
I wasn't going to either. Not even close. Rus, like everything about invertebrates. I'll be on your live shows and you'll kind of reel this stuff off. And it's just like, oh my God, I can't keep up with this. This is too much. Chris, I think your special power is nobody knows. You're like Mr. Invisible. You keep all of this to yourself, all the experience and all the knowledge and all the just your hands are like in everything, and especially fish. I can't.
That's not a good thing either. That's a real nightmare to juggle it. It's horrible right now.
It's got to be. You have like Doctor Strange, like that cape of invisibility or something.
There's 70 tarantulas here. There's centipedes, a leech.
Unreal. We're all dabbling in all kinds of different things, but we've all been keeping isopods now for 3, 4, 5 years. And hopefully what we bring to the table is a diverse knowledge base that we can share with our viewers. And we've got some viewers here. This is great. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Hi, Angie. Nanette, you're our moderator, so go ahead and kick us off with the first question. We're going to let's start with Rus.
Who's the moderator?
You're the moderator.
Then stop talking. You told me I had to do this.
Is there a mute button? I guess that would work for you too. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right.
Turning red, I think.
You should be. Just shush. All right. We're going to go ahead and start out with questions. And we've asked the panelists to try to keep their answers to 1 to 2 minutes so that we can get through all the questions with everybody tonight. And you will be cut off. I have starred questions that have come up in the chat. We will go back through those later. I just have to maneuver between 2 screens, and this is weird.
Viewers, if you have questions, go ahead and add them in. We're going to go through these 10, but we're going to catch yours at the end, too. And I know, Rus, you have a very limited time, and I appreciate you being on the show tonight, but there's a point that you're going to have to drop off, too. So, okay, I'll shut up.
We don't have access to the chat. I see the chat, but I can't type messages in to answer questions for people in the chat. You guys, is that true? Yes. Has anybody heard of Super Zoo in Vegas? And I could have answered that easy, but
we are. If you're in the StreamYard, you should not probably have access to the chat, but we're starring them and we'll bring them up at the end.
Okay. All right. So, question number 1: what the heck is your fascination with isopods? You're not first.
What kind of a question is that?
I don't know.
So is that for me?
Rachel. Go ahead and start us off, Rachel.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I really started with isopods from the bioactive standpoint, using them in my own reptile enclosures. And then I got zebra isopods, which are the best isopods, as we all know. And they're adorable and I love them. And then I realized that I could get many more different kinds of isopods and just keep them. And then there was an explosion of isopods in my house. And here we are.
And here we are. Go ahead,
Rus.
Okay. Well, I think I agree. My story is similar, but I would say that one thing that really draws me to isopods too is that they are so communal. You can put a bunch of isopods, keep them together, and there's something really satisfying about opening a container, looking into it, and seeing this thriving, booming population. They're not being aggressive to one another. You don't have to worry about that, and they just produce for you as long as you're taking good care of them. You don't have to worry about separating things out or whatever. I love that too.
Chris?
Mine's probably a little bit different. Like I came across it, as I say, totally organically, but it's more the fascination of something new. I spent just to give you an example when I came across Lake Tanganyika African cichlids years and years and years ago. I dedicated 13 years solid to studying absolutely nothing but. So once I put a focus onto something, it's kind of dangerous for the way my mind works. And like with isopods, you type isopods on YouTube, and there's a few people's names that pop up right away, and I tend to be one of them. It's not necessarily because of the content. Maybe it's the type of content. I don't know. But like I'm like Rus and you guys, I like to really dig deeper into it. I don't need to have the new Scarlet and the new Embers and all the new stuff that's always coming out that are ridiculously priced. I just need to, I can work with the same basic one, like Rachel said, the zebras. You can learn as much as you want just studying just them.
All right.
Standing.
You get a minute.
I get 1 minute. I can do it in a minute. I keep geckos. That's my passion. 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I got on a project at work. Took all my time. I got away from the geckos. I retired 5 years ago. The geckos needed to be conditioned to start breeding again. I knew that I was 2 years off of getting any babies from the geckos. So a friend of mine, Brian McVeigh, great in the hobby, gave me some isopods and started the whole process. And what it gave me, like Rus was pointing out, was it gave me something instant gratification to see babies. I'm 2 years out of seeing baby geckos, but here's some isopod babies. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 150 different species, like Rachel was saying, like that.
Good job.
Did I keep it under a minute?
Almost.
Almost.
What do you feed your isopods? Rachel, you can go ahead. We'll just keep going the same way.
Yeah, sure. So obviously leaf litter is always the primary diet, and then some sort of calcium source. Cuttlebone and oyster shell is usually what I use. And then fish food flakes for a good staple for protein and a mix of, other good stuff for them. I occasionally do like carrots and stuff like that, but fish food is just my go-to for getting them everything that they need in one go.
Rus?
Oh, yeah. I use fish food a lot too. I tend to use fish food pellets rather than flakes myself, but I don't think, that's not, they both work. I also give pieces of sweet potato. I like to give canned green beans. I like to give pieces of squash and zucchini. Those are probably my 4 favorite go-to vegetables for isopods. And of course, I give a lot of powdered diets, but I'm not going to mention any names here today, but I use it a lot as well. In addition, of course, to leaf litter.
Chris?
I only use Supreme Gecko Isopod cow. That's all I use. It's a great product. You can get it at supremegecko.com.
So what I use is, thank you. What I use
Nailed it.
Same as everybody else. And Chris, read your comments next time from Facebook. But what I use mostly is exactly what everybody else uses, but I'll throw in some dried fish in there. Our schedule is pretty much a powdered food and a vegetable. Or instead of the powdered food, the next time I feed, I'll feed flake food and a vegetable. And my favorite go-to vegetables are zucchini and carrots, or any of the softer vegetables. But again, dried fish. I'll throw in dried crusted gecko diet. They love it, absolutely love it. Mushrooms is a big additive that we'll put in there too, and shrimp.
I think one thing that you got to talk about when you talk about these things is, and I think all of us will agree, is I'm 100% on board for the fact that the isopod as a pet has exploded. Isopod keeping has exploded, as thanks in part to several of the people here and just the community. But in reality, it's over the top. It's absolutely over the top. All these things that people are feeding these things, like if I walk into a pet store and all of a sudden they have all these different isopod accoutrements and things that I could use, like here's a little bridge for your isopods, and here's like, come on, like that's where the pet industry will take stuff like this. But like they'll eat whatever they need to eat. Armadillidiums are primary vegetation based. So, you want to have a lot of white rot wood and things like that. And joking aside, this is a very well thought out formulation. That's not a prop. It is a very well thought out formulation. And then you went and split it and made the two separate ones. And, they're a bit more specific. But honestly, for general, I don't know if it needs it or not. Like, to me, these are animals that I think 99.9% of the people that are going to keep them are going to probably spoil them, and that will probably be a big factor as to why people lose them, is they're over spoiling them. These are animals that need very, very little from us.
Yeah, I totally agree, because overfeeding can be such a big problem for a variety of reasons, including, pests and mold and all of that. So definitely gotta walk that line of enough, but not too much.
Yep.
Excellent points. And at one point, I had a folder out there and I was watching Facebook, and every weird food that I would see, can I feed this? I just gave my Isopods hamburger. I had a dead mouse that I threw, just I swear to goodness, all over the place. And I was going to do a video on that, and I thought, I don't know if people want to see some of that stuff. So yeah, I think that we go over the top with some of that. And like Chris was saying, it's a handful of foods really that they're going to experience in nature.
Well, I've seen package, beautiful package, almost like Pangea type packaging, and it's like eyeballs dehydrated. I know it's a waste product, and yeah, they will break it down, but you're marketing this for isopods.
Yes.
Fish flake, and the fish flakes, you don't need the good ones. You need the absolute cheapest one.
I will say I do feed my dairy cows everything. They get dead feeder insects. My crested gecko dropped her tail recently. They got that. Nothing goes to waste when you have dairy cows, but I'm also not going out of my way to, try to supplement that variety to everybody else.
Great point.
All right. Question number 3 is a two-parter. What is the one isopod that is very underrated for new keepers and overrated for new keepers? You can go ahead, Rachel.
Answers
that's me again. All right.
Yep. I'm just going to go the same pattern.
You've got to change it up.
Then I don't get lost.
It's all good. It's all good. So I would say overrated for new keepers would be anything expensive. New keepers, start with something real easy. And in fact, maybe the underrated is something out of your own garden. Go outside, pick up some wild isopods. There's no reason you can't do that. Set them up a nice little habitat. Don't go crazy when you first start keeping. Now, if you're doing bioactives, you want to not just pick things out from outside. You want to get good captive bred isopods. But if you just want to keep isopods to keep them, underrated, I think, just pick some up from outside and bring them in and care for them.
Russ?
Okay, I want to throw out 2 species. Armadillidium gestroi is underrated in general in the hobby, and they do really well for beginners. They're not difficult to care for, but just in terms of the size they attain, the absolutely wild colors, and the fact that they're robust breeders, but they take a while to breed and they take a while to grow up, so they're not going to eat you out of house and home immediately. They're fantastic for a beginner as well as for anybody else. I will also say that Porcellio hoffmannseggi black, which is probably not actually Porcellio hoffmannseggi, is fantastic because it is so big, so active, decently prolific, not shy at all, and much less territorial and problematic than hoffmannseggi can be in high densities.
Good.
So those are my underrated. Overrated, I'm mostly just agree with Rachel, anything expensive, and especially rubber duckies. People get their heart set on rubber duckies. They are awesome, but they're expensive and they're shy. Why do you want to go spend $100, $150 to get something you're not going to see a whole lot of until you have 150 of them?
Great answer.
Yep, that's great. Chris?
Well, Rachel stole my idea already, so if I'm going to go last, Rachel steals all the good ones. But Rachel's 100% right. But if I were to think of a species that's commonly kept, it's not expensive, it's not overly exciting color-wise, but for fascination from an isopod, it is a true classic, would be any of the Armadillo officinalis types. The fact that they are the true classic roll up into a tight ball that often people use as their logo and stuff, The fact that if you can record them to get the, you need scientific equipment to do it, but they're actually one of the isopods that does generate noise by stridulation. So it's really, really cool and fascinating species, easy to acquire. And a lot of them are just different locales. You get them from Spain and Greece, and they're all over a massive containment area, and they do have slight variations in them. As for overrated, I agree 100%. It's not necessarily just the expensive ones, because expense is driven entirely by greed, in my opinion, when it comes to the isopods. When you guys were getting, I'm not intending this as a shot at anybody, but when you guys were brown boxing in, not you guys, but when they were bringing isopods, Maralunella tricolor into the States and selling them on one of the major platforms, 4 for $500 US. Well, we were importing them legally into the country. So we were paying the exact same price. Plus, we were also paying all the import permits and everything. And we were landing them and being able to sell them retail for 29 Canadian. So that's about 22 American. So the fact that you got people there, that is to me 100% just greed driven. And that's exactly what's happened with the Scarlets and the Diablos and all those other ones out there. But at least the Maralunella are extremely active, but their conditions are a bit challenging. It's anything that comes from a really tropical country, conditions are going to be more challenging because they want it wet, but also airy. Well, that's not good for a North American home, unless you're in Florida. You don't want sopping wet and airy in our house. That means it's open, and that means humidity's in our house, especially when it's wintertime. But and like the Kubars. The Kubars, to me, almost all of them, other than maybe Panda Kings, which replicate really, really fast. Like Russ said, everybody wants rubber duckies, but they're not the fastest replicators. They just aren't. You're never going to get massive numbers quickly, and you're not going to get that reward. And it's the one species that tends to be the one that people find on Pinterest and Instagram that brings them to isopods. So it's hard to take them away from a rubber ducky that looks like that and say, here, how about this gray one? These are cheap. These gray ones I found in my yard. It's a double-edged sword. I don't know if I answered any of your questions.
Right on.
Your turn.
I know why you put me last, because you expect me to go, yeah, it's the same answer as everybody else, and then we just
hate rubber duckies. We know that.
So I'm going to cover most overrated as
Quickly.
Absolutely rubber duckies, and I've been saying that since day one. They hide all the time. So everybody that said rubber duckies, absolutely, they're Rush. You couldn't have said it any better. They're perfect, cool looking. I want that. My second isopod, I want them. I want them right now. But then you go, okay, they hide all the time. So my most underrated, Rachel. So you started talking, I'm going through my mind. I've got to say something about underrated. What can I, and you go, well, the ones that you find in your backyard. And I go, oh yeah, I did a whole video and my number one underrated was the natural ones. Yeah. I'm going to add one to that though really quickly, and that's Punta Canas. I think Punta Canas are far underrated because they're little jelly beans and they're cool and they breed like crazy and you get all kinds of different colors. So underrated.
Only accessible to anybody at the expos. They're economical.
Yes. Always.
Yep.
I love anything with variable colors built right into them. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, like someone's right now, there's Adam in the chat said, I like cappuccinos myself. Well, who doesn't like them? They're great, but at $55 a piece, it's not something most people are going to say, okay, that's I can see value in that right away. It's just not realistic.
Yep.
That's what that's kind of the price they are in Canada, 55 Canadian. So that's like, what, $11 American?
Steve, mine is the Punta Cana.
Huh?
I love those. Those are the coolest ones. All right. Question number 4. How often do you maintain, feed, water, put new leaves in your isopods? And because Chris, you said that Rachel was taking your answers, you get to go first.
Well, I think we're all probably going to be fairly similar. Based on my travel schedule and me constantly going, I'm generally home on weekends unless I'm speaking somewhere for a convention or something. So to me, it's once a week. I check everything once a week. Make certain that before I'm going away. Now, if I'm going to be going away longer than that, I will be just a slightly heavier on the water. I use straight on reverse osmosis water because I live in the country. I have well water, and I use it for all the fish plants, everything. But I do it once a week for my normal maintenance, and I just check the bins. And I'm desperately in need of resetting a bunch of bins, which is partly why I did that video on all those new substrates, because I just harvested all the white rot. I just harvested all the moss. I can't get leaf litter the same way, but it's once a week. I do all the feeding and watering, everything like that. When it comes to resets, is that a different question, Nanette?
No, yes, that is. So
Okay.
wait on that one. All right, Russ.
Okay. I think it's pretty similar. I generally have my kids do the basic isopod husbandry, and I have them make sure they're watering at least once a week, feeding at least once a week, often twice a week, with feeding, and then dumping a handful of leaf litter in once a week. That's the goal.
Russ, how do you
Rachel.
do that? How did you get the kids to do that?
Yeah,
I
really,
pay
Russ.
them to do it.
We have to work on that.
Wow.
Rachel.
I would say once a week, definitely for checking, though a lot of the stuff can go a lot longer, especially the bigger bins. But yeah, definitely at least, visually inspect and making sure nobody's dry and then, doing some feeding. I would also like to point out that I am amused that Wally's lights all turned off at the same time as my lights, except it looks like you turned yours back on.
Thinking the same, great minds.
Yeah, somebody wanted to know what was flickering above your head, but it is the ceiling fan.
I can never find it. So that's the ceiling fan. Maintenance schedule, we're the same way, once a week. Now, I'll say that the last couple of months, 3 months, we've missed a couple of weeks in there. There was one time where we were doing shows, and it was just crazy with the geckos starting to breed and setting them up, where we fed, missed a week, and then fed the next week. Everybody looked exactly the same. There was no difference whatsoever. So like Chris has mentioned earlier, if we know that we might be missing a little bit, we'll probably water a little bit more, but once a week.
One more note to that is like one challenge I faced, and it was something I never even thought about, is I don't have a furnace. Every one of you, I don't know where everybody lives. I know, Wally, you live in Milwaukee, right? Where do you live,
Yep.
Russ?
I'm in Utah.
Oh, so dry. Yeah, dry.
Dry.
And Rachel?
Ohio. So
Okay.
we
So
get
I
all
don't
the
know
weather.
how, like to me, I live up in Canada, and we don't have a furnace, and that freaks everybody out. But I have radiant heat. So I have a little tiny microwave size thing that runs all these hot water tubes through my house, which means my basement floors and my upstairs floors are the same temperature all the time. But in the wintertime, heat's running and it's on the ground. So anybody that keeps isopods low thinking, oh, the basement will be cooler, it's not at my place. So I had to really be careful. I lost a few cultures by not being on top of that. And people need to be cognizant of that when it comes to things like seasonal change. Like all of a sudden, it's springtime, it's warmer, it's not bad. Now we're going to turn on the air conditioning, and now we want it to be like a fridge when we walk in our house. Well, that's a dramatic change. Not just for isopods, but for everything, right? Plants, fish tanks, everything. We just have to be cognizant of that.
And on the other side of that is, in the fall, everything starts drying out a lot worse.
Exactly.
I know for our
You
crested
turn the heater
geckos.
on, the furnace on.
Yeah. So we're missing a little bit more. Luckily, when we were missing a week here or there, it was in the springtime, so it wasn't too bad.
It didn't hurt anybody.
No.
Number 5, what are a couple good bioactive tropical isopods, and what are a couple good bioactive arid isopods? Russ, you want to start us out?
Yeah. Well, I would say that one of my favorite all-around isopods, whether it's arid or not, as long as there's some decent ventilation, is Porcelionides or Porcelionides, however you say it, Prenosis. It is one of the best all-around isopods. If I could just keep one isopod for bioactive enclosures and have it be my all-purpose isopod, that would be it.
That's
Hands
powder
down.
orange. Or powder orange, right? Same one?
Yep, powder orange and the Oreo crumbles and the powder blues, whatever morph it is, that species is the one for me if I had to pick one. I also like Porcelio dilatatus, though, the giant canyons, depending on what you're keeping them with. But that can be a great one. And then there's always the devil's rice, Trichorhina tomentosa. They can be great in a lot of setups, especially if the setup is moist, a more tropical setup. Pretty good one, too.
Rachel?
Couldn't agree more with what Russ just said. Those are my top 3 also. No further comment.
Okay. Wally, I'll let you go before Chris.
I'm trying to think of something I can add to that conversation. The only thing that I can add is that I have a tank back here somewhere that I have some Australian geckos, velvet geckos, and I have logs and sphagnum moss. I have little areas set up especially for the isopods, not for the geckos, but for the isopods. And I have the Punta Cana in there. So anytime I'm in there, I've got to lift up a log and see how the Punta Cana are doing. And they're doing great. Now, in that enclosure, I also have a quick story. I also have a day gecko in there. And they do great. I don't know if we lost everybody here. They do great in that day gecko does great in there, but I also feed it crusted gecko diet. And I realized that the isopods like the crusted gecko diet. And the first time I fed, I had like 50 Punta Canas stuck in the crusted gecko diet. So beware.
Ooh.
If you're doing isopods in a bioactive and you're feeding for crusted geckos, you're putting it on the ground, your isopods will find the food and get stuck in it and die.
Yep.
Mine will climb all the way up to the top for that. It is impressive.
Wow.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I have zebras in with my crusty, and sometimes they're just hanging out on the ledge all the way up, and I don't understand it, but they're happy.
They're hungry. You don't feed enough.
Oh, they got plenty in there.
Yeah.
Chris,
I did a video with a friend of mine who's a fish friend, and his daughter wanted a crested gecko. So I preached to him the idea of doing a bioactive, and I basically just gave him a cocktail of isopods. I literally just gave him like 25 or 30 of all the isopods I had in my collection. I just thought it'd be kind of funny, survival of the fittest, and see what happens. And he only had one crested gecko in like a 55-gallon tank, and they planted a few plants like pothos, just took over the whole thing. But they had these fake cork walls, and they didn't glue them in place. And I went over there and did a video, and I did the video. There's a video of it. I don't know. It's called Bioactive Crested Gecko or whatever, if the moderators want to find it. But you look at the cork wall, and it's just solid isopods. They don't bother her crested gecko at all, which people often told me. He says, oh, it's going to hurt. They'll do this. It's never happened. But, like, yeah, they'll eat. Anytime she feeds any of those gel foods, she has to be cautious of it to make sure that the gecko's actually getting some food. Because the gecko didn't eat any of the isopods. And the only one I have, I only have 2 isopods. I've never kept an arid display that I put isopods in, because the arid displays for me are tarantulas like brachypelmas and stuff like that. And they're bone dry, so I don't add anything to those. I don't have anything else. But I do have the powder orange. I don't remember the name that Russ said, but it's over there. And I have a whole pile of those, and I add them in all the things. And I do have the white ones, the dwarf whites, the devil's rice or whatever you call it. And truth be told, that is the hardest isopod for me to culture. And I don't know why. It's in a totally different bin, in a totally different room. It's right on the floor where it's going to be the warmest. And it's just like, no, that's the slowest replicating species I have. That I've had a culture of those since I started, and I've never introduced them to anything because they just haven't really done anything. They're just still there. I go and check it, and there's still some in there, but they've never gone, wow, I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing.
That's crazy.
It sounds like the 3 of us need to send Chris like pounds and pounds of dwarf whites. I have pounds of fish. There you go. Yeah, I've tried that. It works well.
Anytime I have extra isopods, like large volumes of isopods, like something that'll go stupid, dairy cows, Espagnoli, any of those ones that will replicate really fast. I know the isopod people are going to burn torches for this, but I throw them all in containers. And once I've got a big enough container, I throw it in a Ziploc bag and I throw it in the freezer. That's great fish food. It's high calcium. It's great fish food, man. Like if you keep
fish are like this big,
you're not wasting it.
My fish are like this big, so I.
All sorts. So right now, there's piranhas over there. There's a West African Congo tank. There's breeding different dwarf cichlids and stuff, and some different characins. There's stuff like. It's a myriad collection. I don't have anywhere near like what I had before, but it's all over the place. So whenever it rains, I'm out on the driveway waiting with my daughter with the bus, and I've got tweezers and a cup collecting worms off the driveway. Like it's
oh yeah,
it all works. Sorry, I didn't mean
Alrighty.
to tell you.
Question number 6. Given a good starter culture, and tell us what a good starter culture is, how long should new keepers wait until they have mankai or babies, for those that don't recognize that? Russ.
Okay. Well, I would say a big mistake that beginners make is just starting with a small count, like a 10 count. I'm not saying that's necessarily a mistake. I mean, you can do it. You can start with smaller than a 10 count and succeed. I just say if you want to get success and you want to get it fast, one of the best ways to do it is to get a 30 count, get a 50 count if you can, or more, and that will start you off right and faster. And you're likely to have babies within a few days if you start that big, just because they're bound to be females with marsupial that are ready. That will help
If
a
more
lot.
vendors did that though too, right? Like you'd have
Yeah.
to see vendors doing that.
Yeah, there aren't that many vendors that are doing it, but a lot of times people will say, hey, what do you recommend for this tank? And I will tell them, you could start with a 10 count, a 12 count, but I recommend with that size of tank, start with 36, start with 48 of them. You're gonna see difference a lot more quickly. And you could see, I mean, I've received isopods in the mail that have produced bonkai in the deli cup. So the wait may be actually 0 minutes. Sometimes it is. But the bigger a group you start with, the faster it's going to be. Starting with a 10, 12 count, if you don't have babies within a couple of months, either it's a really slowly reproducing species or maybe something's wrong.
Yeah. And like even more important to that is also making sure that, like not only getting that right species and getting it set up, but like when we're dealing with a new person, they need to see that result. They need to have that recognition that it's happened. Like they need that positivity to keep them involved in it. But if they get the wrong species, or like Russ mentioned, a slow replicating species, they're not going to have that. Because as well as I do, everybody that's going to be new is going to be at the bin all the time, checking on stuff, lifting up the bark all the time. They're just going to be doing it. Just leave them alone. But they're not going to be able to do that. So we need to give them those basic species in a larger count, just like Russ said, 100%.
Okay, Chris's turn is done. Now it's Rachel's.
Yes. Yes, I agree. So something I always tell people when I'm talking to them at shows is, more is always better. So if you can start with more, that's great. A 10 count will get you where you need to go eventually, but if you can start with more, that is better. And I agree, like quite often when I'm doing shows, I got babies in cups that dropped, the night before. And they've just, had babies since they got packed up. Especially with your faster reproducing species, your powders and stuff. That's something where, if you've got a mixed colony, or a mixed starter culture, it's sometimes 0 minutes. And then some of them, can definitely take a few months, especially if you're, doing clowns, or, you've got juveniles of the slower reproducing species, it can take a couple months, and you just got to be patient.
What about you?
Great points. And Chris, doggone it, you stole my point. I was going to refer back to the video.
You guys are good at blaming each
Yeah,
other.
we say mind track here. I was going to refer back to a video where I literally did that.
Because I wasn't wearing my hat.
Any babies? Any babies? Keep opening the tank every day to see if there's babies. Oh, there you go. Now we're on the same way. So I think the more you bother them, obviously, the slower they're going to reproduce. I feel, in my opinion. But, it depends. Like Rachel was saying, dwarf whites, I mean, what time is it? You get the cup and they're already, repopulating. It depends on the species. Like zebras, I feel zebras and clowns are a little bit slower. And sometimes you'll get a cup in the mail, or you'll look at it, at a reptile show, and they're just teeny tinies and not adults. So you have to wait that month, when they have 2-3 months for them even to get up to size, and then another month or two for babies to start showing up. So,
that's also a breed factor, though. Really, like if you're talking, and unless you're talking like some of the exotic species or the spikies and any of these really expensive ones that slow replications, duckies and stuff, but if you're talking any of the basic stuff, they shouldn't be little tiny baby mankai is what you're selling to people at the shows. That's just, to me, that's
Agreed.
just irresponsible on our part.
Yep, agreed, 100%.
They should be starting off these people right with a good, proper culture. And and I don't know. I don't sell to anybody else. I sell to one single stores. I only sell to one particular store, and I do it on credit. And that's how I've done all my vivariums. I get everything in from him. But anytime I sell them, it's like he sells them as a 10 count. I count them out as a 20 count. Well, what else am I? You guys already know what I'm going to do with all the extras. I'm going to I'm not like you. I'm not Wally, who has goes to these shows and sells these things, or Rachel and has a table at shows. So supply is not infinite. Like, to me, I need an outlet to get rid of some of this stuff. Otherwise, it goes in the freezer.
Good point. Good point.
All right. Next question. How deep should your substrate be? Ooh, Rachel.
That's a kind of a loaded question because it's not a matter of how deep it is. It's the components that are in it and how it's layered.
Okay, he took over and it wasn't his turn.
It's Chris's turn now, so go ahead, Chris.
Yeah,
We'll come
go
back
ahead,
to me.
Chris. Finish it now.
You can't really answer that question, I don't think. Like, each of us
Not
will
my
have
question.
we'll have a container, and each of us will use containers or tanks or whatever we're using. And then, obviously we can't have 15 inches of substrate depending on what we're using, because we obviously want to be able to see them. But it's all the stratification of the layers of the different components that are going to make up the ecosystem that is the Earth the substrate. There's a lot of factors involved in that. Drainage layers, there's a lot of components in that. The bacterias and the fungi and all those things that are going to take place within that environment. I don't have an answer of how deep it's going to be. It depends on the species. Rubber ducky, all the Kubara species that really like to burrow, more. To me, like the problem being, if I take something like any of the armadillidiums, Klugii, any of them, and you give them 4 inches of substrate, it's just going to give you a longer window of time. But when you do have to do that cleaning and reset, it's just going to be a longer window of time to do it. Right?
Yep.
Russ, what are you thinking?
I have to agree. It's more about the specific isopod species, what their needs are, and what's in your substrate than the depth. You can get by with a lot of isopods with very little substrate if you're doing it right. But it does increase the maintenance frequency. So it's generally not a good idea to go too shallow for that reason. And in terms of replacing the substrate, but also in terms of hydration. So I usually use 1 inch or 2, but there are some isopods that need more. But it is a complex issue, and it varies so much on so many different factors. So I agree with Chris.
Rachel?
Yeah, I agree. I like at least a couple inches of just the base substrate, enough that if, when you're watering on one end of it, that it's going to hold that moisture and you don't have to worry about it drying out in a week. Ideally, I don't want to necessarily have to water everything every week. So ideally, I want it to hold that for, a couple weeks if it needs to. And then a really good thick layer of leaf litter on top of that, which helps, hold in the moisture and gives that extra depth as well. But yeah, to that point, you don't want to go too deep. I've had some bins that I've experimented doing like real deep substrate in. It doesn't work. If you're trying to get isopods out of it again, it's without substrate. It's no good. So,
What are you thinking?
Until Rachel's very, very last statement, I was going to say, I relate this all to fish. And, somebody will say, how big of a tank should I use for Neolampologus multifasciatus, the very small, teeny tiny shell dwellers? And the answer isn't a 5-gallon or 10-gallon. It's however big you can, get a tank and put in there and use, because they'll benefit from a more stable environment the bigger it is. But Rachel has a really good point. You don't want to go too big. I mean, we've got some containers that I want way too much substrate on, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to clean this one, or even get it out of the shelf and work on it. It's a pain in the butt. So, we do the same. We'll go about 2-3 inches at the most.
3 inches.
Is that 3 inches? I don't know. That looks like 3 inches. We go about 3 inches, but the key point is, and Russ mentioned this, giant Spanish will go a little bit shallower. Rubber duckies will go a little bit more. Giant canyons will go, like 3 feet deep for them. So
it feels like it.
Yeah.
Well, if we can add to that, Wally, there's also one thing I think it's very important to mention is, like Holly, you do this for part of your livelihood, correct? So you're replicating isopods on not a commercial scale, but on a large scale, same as Wally, and you guys do the shows, you're breeding them. But if somebody were to only want to be as a hobbyist and only wants to have 1 or 2 types of isopods, I would very strongly try to find them the way to set up a nice big naturalistic tank, something that they can not a tub that's opaque, something that they can visually see their interactions and the stratifications of the substrate layers and plant it and see how it goes. And that to me is vastly different than anybody that's trying to breed them for resale at shows. For us, it's not a negative. It's for people that are doing it for the shows. We're the ones that are, you guys are the ones that are supplying the chain. You guys are the ones that are making it happening and making the isopod hobby grow. But for those one or twos that are only doing it for kind of like, I want to see how cool this is, and they pick up a tub of Kluge eye or something, they bring it home. Well, let's appreciate it. Let's set it up cool and see how it goes.
Totally agree.
Wonderful
That
point.
makes good sense. All right. Next question is, do you, and if you do, how do you sterilize the wood or the leaves that you put in your isopod enclosures?
And before we pick
And
somebody to go
Chris,
first,
you can't answer, so just stop.
before we pick somebody, viewers, if you have a question, leave your question in the chat. We're going to get to some
There's
open
12
questions.
of them.
I know, Russ, you have about 10 more, not even 10 more minutes here.
About 10. Yeah.
Okay.
About 10.
So we're going to
Unrelated, Wally. Can you
Yeah.
have Frank? Frank keeps posting my Mataquaris page. If possible, could he post the link to the Realm Natura? Chris, the Mataquaris Realm Natura page, because that's the one that's going to be future, is going to be where all the new content will always be. That's where that one's posted.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right on.
Okay. So, Russ, how do you or do you sterilize your wood or your leaves?
Well, in an ideal world, I would never sterilize leaves because you're losing so much when you do that in terms of microfauna, in terms of bacteria that the isopods are going to eat directly, that kind of thing. In an ideal world, I would never do it. And I am getting away from doing it when I possibly can by, instead of sterilizing them, just soaking them an extended period of time to get them to decompose really nicely in an environment where you're not going to get stone centipedes or things like that living in that. So if you dump a whole bunch of leaves into a bucket, which is what I do now, or a bin, and put it in my shed and let it sit there and steep for weeks or months, and then the leaves start rotting and they get all icky, and the isopods love it. It's full of good bacteria and fungi and that kind of thing that they eat. And what they're naturally going to gravitate to in the wild is that kind of leaf and that kind of state. So in an ideal world, I'd never do that. There are things with, when I need to ship some things and I have to, if I'm shipping leaves, I can't ship leaves in that state. So I will ship dry leaves that have been sanitized by heating them. But in an ideal world, I would never do it.
We lost your last comment, Russ.
So I was recapping. In an ideal world, I would never sterilize them.
Okay.
You have to, and I'm not, this is not my comment on the subject, but do you have to, because you guys deal with permits and shipping things across borders, state borders, do you have to sterilize leaves and substrates and stuff like that to legally ship?
Yes, according to U.S. APHIS standards, you have to sanitize them, heat sanitize them before you ship them. Yep.
Good question.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that point, for me, I sterilize just for those reasons, because I am selling, because I am shipping, because they are going into other people's bioactives and into my bioactives. I can't run that risk of having pests and things that I don't know coming in. So yes.
Right.
How do you sterilize?
Heat. So bake in the oven. Yep.
Okay. Chris, you don't sterilize?
No, I have done it. I've done videos on it, and I don't anymore. Literally, I use components like sea soil, fox farms, the bat guano, any of those type of soils, that worm castings, any of those soils that have any of those added components. I don't care which one it is, as long as it doesn't have too much other crap in it. That's my base. I don't use any coconut products or anything like that. But when it comes to stuff like the white rot wood that I'm getting, there could be little centipedes. There could be things like that I don't want to introduce, or the moss. I will literally just throw them. I just go to IKEA and I buy the biggest tote that they have, and I put about 10 inches or a foot of it in the tote. And then I fill it with water above the line of that stuff because it all floats right away. And then I have another one of those totes exactly the same size, and I put it on top, and I put a cinder block on top of it, and it pushes it down till it overfills. And by overfilling it, basically removes everything that's in that tote is below the water line. And I'll leave it for 48 hours. because the bacteria and the fungus and all that stuff, you know, they're going to be used to flooding. But any sort of other things that may be detrimental, centipedes and stuff like that, same when I mentioned that comment about the earthworms when it rains, they leave the ground when it floods. They have no other choice. Centipedes and those other bad things will do the same thing. So to me, that's what I do. But you know, like you guys are all south of the border. You guys got like all palm trees in your front yards and stuff like that. In the wintertime here, it's, you know, it's a little bit different. You know, I can't harvest leaf litter for like 10 months of the year. I can do. There's just nowhere I can do it. So like to me, as soon as spring comes up, and spring comes up and goes fast, like our seasons are fast, I rush out to the woods like a hobbit. I go trolling and I'm grabbing as much as I can because I have to buy, like literally I have to harvest a year's worth of stuff. But once we get to fall, I hope to have all my Isopod bins completely reset, and anything that I need beyond that is extra because I keep all that stuff in the garage. It's not because I want to, it's just strictly because of space. I don't envy any three of you with these large collections of Isopods and all this extra stuff that you have to store for them. But the fact that I have to have like 3, 4, 5 garbage bags of oak leaves that I have to go and harvest, and like I can't imagine what you guys need.
Yeah.
3 or 4 garbage bags full of oak leaves. That's cute.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's me. Like I don't need more than that. I like back when we were keeping fish, and me and Wally have known each other indirectly through fish for decades. Like back, I used to harvest oak leaves like that before, and I would basically throw them in pots. You know, go to a Salvation Army or any of those discount places where you can get a used pot. Don't use your wife's kitchen pot. Trust me, don't do it. And I would fill it with oak leaves and water, and I would boil it down to get the water that I would get out of that. Like the oak leaves are great, but the water was essential for doing all sorts of things for breeding tropical fish. So, sorry, didn't mean to derail again.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Great points. We have.
30
Is
seconds.
it my turn? We
30
have.
seconds.
I think at one point last year we had 35 bags of big black garbage bags.
That's a garage.
leaves.
That's a full garage.
It pretty
It
much
was
is.
half the
know,
garage.
unfortunately.
You're right.
Our
It's
2-car garage went down to 1-car garage. So, you know, I've been preaching forever, you know, throw them in black bags, throw them outside, let the sun bake them. But, my Isopods, Steve-O just commented, Chris's new video on substrate was incredibly helpful where you point out some of those. I'm just like you other folks here, I'm going to go over to the water and soak and start doing that. I think the black bags do really well, but like Russ pointed out right in the beginning, it takes away a lot of the good stuff out of.
It only works though when it's freshly harvested. Like I freshly harvested 3 weeks ago. They're sitting in, some of the stuff is still sitting in the garage right now. So nothing's going to happen to it. But I will still do the exact same thing because some of those animals, like, and this is going to be revert back to my science brain, my plant brain, is already goes, oh, my plant is flowering. It's loving it. No, your plant is dying. Flowering is its only chance left of survival to fit seeds. And animals will do the same thing. So to me, I want to remove any of those eggs and stuff like that that may be there, that may be present as well.
Perfect. I'm gonna jump in just real quick. I know
Yeah,
Russ, you're on the run.
You're doing what I'm doing.
I know.
So
Question number
That's
10 and
where I
let
was
Russ go.
going. Yep,
Okay,
that's
I'll just
where I
stop
was
talking.
heading. Russ, what is one tip you would give new keepers to help them care for their isopods better?
Okay. I would say that it's very important to keep in mind that the bin that you start with and the bin that you have 6 months later, it's exactly the same bin, but very different things are going to happen during that time. You're introducing a generally very small population into a bin full of this pristine setup. And months later down the road, it's going to be more, ideally, if everything goes well, it's going to be more highly populated. And a lot of the things that you put in there will have broken down. And so you're going to have to treat that bin differently in a lot of ways. Think of it differently. It's not the same bin anymore, even though it's the same plastic, the same lid, the same ventilation. A lot of things have gone on there. You need to keep that in mind in terms of your patience. Like when you're looking at the bin at the first and saying, oh, I bought these isopods and I never see them. Well, wait a few months, and when you have 60, 80, 120 of them, things will be different, and you will see more, and you also have to feed more often. You also have to think about renewing leaf litter more often and all kinds of things like that. So it's not the same bin, even though it looks like the same bin on the outside.
Perfect.
Wonderful. On that, before you go around, Russ, I can't thank you enough. I know you have other commitments, and you're like 10 seconds away from your daughter's commitment. So thank you very, very, very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
It was a genuine pleasure. Thanks to all of you. And I really enjoyed interacting with all of you today, those here in the panel and those joining in through comments. So thank you, everybody.
Night, Russ.
Good night.
Cheers, boss.
See you later.
Go down to Russ and remove him.
Remove him.
Oh, he's gone. Never mind. He bailed on us. He just
rude.
jumped. We have a couple more questions. We have a ton here, so we're going to go a little bit more, folks, if you don't mind. He's playing with a leech.
Somebody thinks he's drinking it.
I'm feeding it.
Did we want to finish the question that we were on just now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Let's
you,
finish where we were. Thank
Just
you.
because I actually really wanted to answer this one.
Yeah.
For me, for new keepers, the number one mistake that I see new keepers make is letting their isopods dry out. A lot of people think that they can just spray on top, like they have some moss and they spray on top of it. And I get the question all the time. People say, people come up to me at shows or whatever, and they say, hey, I got some isopods and they died like in a couple days. And when I troubleshoot, it's usually that it has dried out in between, and people will go, well, it was only dry for a day or so. They can't die that quick, can't they? And the answer is yes, they can. So just be very cognizant of making sure that you're not just keeping the top layer of your substrate moist, but you actually want to water it so that you have water all the way through on that moist end, so that they always have that moisture, because they actually need that to be able to breathe.
Wow.
That's a good point.
Outstanding point.
Chris, you got anything there on a tip?
Oh, I definitely.
Besides the leech?
I have a tip already. It's on the tip of my finger. He has to eat. How do you feed a leech otherwise?
No.
My honest tip, honestly, is
How do I hit remove on this? No.
is just say no, because new keepers have no idea how far this rabbit hole is going to go. You're going to start innocently enough for the cute thing of culture of zebras. You're going to, this is awesome. It's going to be so excited. And then a good keeper like Russ or Russ or Rachel or Wally are going to send you home with this really nice culture, and you're going to get babies raised where you're going to be rewarded. And you know what's going to happen? You'll be at the Dollar General. Is that what you guys call your dollar stores down there? You'll be at the Dollar General buying a whole bunch of tubs, and you'll have 12 species at the end of the month. You have no idea what you're setting yourself up for. That's it.
It's true. It's true. It's an addiction. Welcome to the isopod addiction.
It is. And it's true with anything that you do. You just have to, I'm going to jump over to my tip for beginners in just a second, but I want to emphasize Rachel's point. Above and beyond, that's the best point in this whole presentation tonight. Check your substrate. And if you have clear bins, when you water, take a look once in a while underneath and make sure that water is saturated all the way down to the bottom for some of your bin, because, adding water doesn't mean that you're, saturating it all the way down. If you're not, then, a lot of the isopods have to have that burrowing into a moisture substrate. A lot of
the components that we use as substrates are hydrophobic. Such as like peat moss. When you get a new bag of peat moss, or if there's peat moss added to a soil, it's hydrophobic. It takes a lot for that water molecule to transfer. It takes a ton. Like, you have to really wet it down. If it wasn't isopods, you could add a little dash of soap and it would make it transfer very, very quickly. But we can't, right? So you got to really soak it down. That's a very solid point, Rachel. 100%.
Absolutely.
That's the one thing you always tell me, to add water. I never add enough.
Yeah.
You're always like, more.
I think you're going to lose our thing if you keep going up there. Anyways, my point is kind of based on Chris's too, about, just kind of watching what you're doing. And this is true with fish or reptiles or isopods or anything. Research before you go out there and say, oh my God, I want 10 isopods at this reptile show. Give me 10 cultures. And then you go to the next table, buy 10 more. Do some research on these isopods. Leading to my next point, which is find 3 friends that you can talk to and get their opinions. Rachel might have something different to say than Mr. Biggs, than Russ or Wally.
To your point, Wally, to your
Add them
point,
all
Wally,
together.
if I were at a reptile expo and I'm a beginner and I have no idea what these little weird bugs are, and I walk up to Rachel's table and Rachel's going to talk to me about this one particular isopod, she's going to show me the passion. Just like I could see that already. The passion is already going to show, and she's going to tell that person everything about that isopod, but how she keeps that isopod. That to me is beyond going on a forum, going on Facebook and saying, how do you guys keep this? That is direct experience for the exact animals that you're taking home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we as hobbyists or vendors cannot control home temperatures, ventilation, air, AC, those type of things. We can only give the basics on how we care for the animals. You have to adapt. But we are also freely giving pictures and imagery of how we are keeping these animals, how they're ventilated. And that's a vastly different facet of how people keep these things. Like I keep them in tubs that are lockable, that have, you know, seals and stuff like that. There's one right underneath my laptop, so it raises it up. But it has those little seals so no other bugs get in and out, so I can control. That's the scientist in me that wants to control that aspect. But like, those are important factors. You know, like Isopod.com. What's the gentleman's name? He's a great guy. He's been on your show. He's been on Josh's program. But that gentleman there, what's his name?
Ben.
Ben. He keeps all of his isopods in open containers. Wally, you were there. And he uses fans to create the ventilation. Exactly. I'm exactly the same way as you on that. And I was like, I never even considered that.
Nope.
But that is exceptional because it provides that flow. He doesn't drill vents. He doesn't drill holes. He doesn't do anything. And if I get lightheaded and passed out, he's still feeding, just so you know. But like that is where we talk about isopods. And that's the whole purpose of coming together and having these discussions, is we're trying to share that information about how we can get together, how we can better our community, how we can better these things. But the variables are still always going to be there.
Yes.
So like to me, when it comes to those basic isopods, Rachel, Wally, you guys, to me, if I'm coming to a show and I'm buying it from one of you, I want to know how you are keeping that, because that will cause a lot less stress. The stress of you putting them in that tub, stress of you bring them to that show, taking them out, put them on a table and having everybody gawk at me for 2 days, and the stress of me taking them home and setting up in a brand new sterile environment that I probably wasn't ready for, but I followed your directions and I got it set up. All those things, everything that you guys have told me is going to reduce the stress on those animals, and it's going to give me a better chance at success.
Yes. And to reiterate your point, Chris, about the show, Rachel, have you ever had somebody come up to you and said, I'm not going to buy any isopods, but can you help me with a question I have with isopods? Have you ever said, sorry, I'm just here to sell isopods, I'm not going to answer your question? So that guy over there, go talk to him.
Never. No, I am at shows to talk to people. If I sell stuff while I'm there, that's an added bonus. So by all means, come ask me any questions you have at a show. I will tour you through every isopod that's on my table, even if you don't even want to buy anything, but you want to look at them and tell me how cute they are. Great. That's what I'm here for.
Can I ask you any questions at a show, though?
Any questions? Yeah, come ask any questions. I might not be able to answer them.
What type of shampoo you use?
I mean, that would be super weird, but you could.
That's the way I am.
And to go full circle, I'll go back to my original point of find 3 people and talk to them, and adding on what Chris said, because we all keep them different. Juggle that information and come up with the best idea that you have out of all of those points.
All right, we're going to go through the questions now that the people have. We skipped one. Sorry.
Okay. No,
when should you clean out your isopod enclosure? When should you change it over? Rachel, how often and when do you do it?
When you start getting a lot of frass. It's not, for me, it's not like a specific time frame. Smaller colonies, it's going to be a lot longer than a big, huge producing colony. But when you get to the point where you got a lot of frass, your substrate's not at the nutrition level that you need, then you know, and depending on how you want to do it too, you know, sometimes it's a split into other colonies. So you take, you know, some of that substrate and add new in, or you do a total refresh. But total refreshes are a lot of work, like Chris was talking about. So it depends on how you want to manage it. I also keep millipedes, and so that involves me doing total substrate changes. And that is just I keep bins of old substrate because I have to pull babies out for like 3 months after.
Yes, good point.
Is anybody else fascinated by the fact that there's only 2 animals in the world that I'm aware of that produced sharp-edged poop? Isopods being one of them. Isopods produce these little tiny rectangles.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really weird.
What's the only mammal that does that?
Isn't it like armadillos or something?
Wallabies
I
in
know.
Australia.
Wallabies. Oh, okay. Because they make little cubes, right? Yeah.
No, sorry, not wallabies. He's right. Isopods and more is right. It's wombats. They produce these little solid cubes. I'm like, try and think of that from a botanical standpoint. We all know anatomy. We're not going to get gross, but like, how do you produce with sharp 90-degree edges? That is fascinating. That's the fascinating side to me. That's probably the most fascinating thing about isopods to me is how they can do that. I think that's amazing.
I'll practice. I'll let you know.
Oh,
Please don't.
You need to raid.
We're moving on.
We don't need any reports on this. Thanks.
No words.
Raid your
No
cake
words.
decorating drawer and get one of those little
No. Okay, moving on to a new question.
Man, it's going, the visionary.
Just let it
I'm
go.
still bleeding.
The question is, where do
bleeding.
you do most of your sales come from? Are they live shows or cultures online that you get?
I would say the majority of my sales is in person at shows. I do quite a bit of business online, but now if you asked me this during COVID, obviously it was online, and those sales were crazy. I do most of my sales in person.
I was a little panicked during COVID when we had people come to the house and we'd run outside with the little black bag and a mask on and hand the bag over and run back in, and our neighbors were probably going, "What on earth is going on?"
Drugs out of the house again. Yeah.
Something was going on. What about you?
I think ours is broken into shows and on sales, but I think we're probably like 3 to 1 online.
Mm-hmm.
I would say
Lately.
Yeah.
Yep. Are you okay, Chris?
Oh, I'm fine. I don't sell anything though. I don't have any access to sell. We don't have any permits. I can sell to whoever I wanted in Canada. I just refuse to deal with that whole thing. I don't envy you guys at all having to deal with selling stuff like that. I just don't.
I don't think there's any greater thrill that I have than to have somebody asking a question. I don't know anything about isopods. Share, tell me about it. And then for them to walk away, if they do or don't.
I agree with you 100%. At the shows, having that bond and that experience and seeing that excitement and that passion, that one-on-one, I agree with that. The online web sales, that doesn't appeal to me in the slightest. But that's not an option for me. I have no interest. Like shipping in Canada, even if I wanted to sell a $12 culture of isopods, it's still going to cost $120 to ship it in Canada. So it's not something we do.
Yeah.
No.
I gotcha.
That question came from Misfit Farms. Kate Degana has a question, and her question is, I hit show.
Okay.
How do you deal with the mites?
So if you've got mites, it's usually the ones that you're talking about are usually in the same niche as your springtails, eating the same stuff. So you can usually just hold off on feed and supplemental food for a little bit and they'll naturally die off. But most of the mites that you're going to get like that aren't going to be harmful anyway. So it's not a huge deal either way.
I've never had it come up. I've never worried about it. I don't know why. It's never really been an issue for me, but exactly like you said, Rachel's 100%.
Agreed. And it's never been an issue. And it might be because we keep springtails in every enclosure, heavily springtailed. And I think that they probably maybe outcompete the mites. I don't know.
They do,
I
yeah.
would think
Springtails
that-
are a huge help with keeping unwanted pests down, because they'll help with the mites, they'll help with fungus gnats, they'll help with all sorts of things. So
I
would
often
recommend.
find that it's the people that are a little bit heavy-handed with the water. And before you get into the next one, where Isopods is asking that, do you guys have any of you used those mosquito dunks? I've never done that. I know that's a big deal that a lot of people talk about using that to control fungus gnats and all sorts of things. I've never done it.
I actually used them for the first time this year. I had a fruit fly problem in some of my springtail cultures, and I used them in there, and it worked great. So, but
No
I've
issues,
never
right?
needed to use them for fungus gnats. Yeah, but fruit flies, they work well on as well.
Yep.
Sorry.
Well, no, good question. We occasionally will have, an outbreak, and especially when you do new cultures, when you're setting up new cultures, we'll have the gnats, and I'll put up the yellow strips away from the isopods for far enough distance away, and that usually takes care of them within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I run a couple catchies also just to grab fungus gnats like when they're out in the room.
Do you know that I have one of those? It's awesome. I love it. My wife loves it. The fact that I have but you can't buy the sticky pads on Amazon.ca in Canada. I have to. So whenever I go to the States, or if I'm going to speak in the States, I have to order like a whole bunch of them, and I have to smuggle them back like I'm a drug lord. I got these little sticky pads because I can't make the pad.
Okay.
This won't stop bleeding. I can feed a whole family right now. He's swimming around like a maniac in the tank right now.
All right. Steve-O wants to know, what is the one thing that you learned in the hobby later that you wish you had learned way earlier?
Oh, that's tough.
Not how much you would like isopods and want 5,000 buckets of them.
That was the first thing I thought of personally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't have anything. I haven't been in it that long. To me, when I think of long term, I think of like me fish. Like I've kept fish for ever since I was a toddler. I can answer that question for fish, but isopods, nothing. If I were to have anything to mention to the isopod side of that, it would be more along the lines of, like, don't believe all the hype. Don't listen to all the stuff that you see online.
Stole my answer again.
Sure he did.
Yeah, just talk to the people. Talk to Wally. Talk to Russ. Talk to Rachel. Talk to any of the people that are true vendors. There's lots of really, really solid people in our isopod community. And if you see them at the show, spend some time with them, spend money with them, treat them well. They will give you everything you're ever going to need.
I can't agree more. And when that question came up, it was exactly the same thing. Stop trying to feed them 48 different types of foods. Stop making your substrate, 163 different components. Just basic it down and talk to a Rachel. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I agree. Simplify. Yeah.
Simplify.
Cassandra wants to know, do you feel that the isopod industry will grow in the future and reach a wide variety of people?
I think yes. I'll go. I think yes, absolutely. And I've been seeing that just since I've started vending, in the last 4 or 5 years here. When I started vending, people would come up to me and ask me what was on my table. And then when I explained it to them, they go, but I can get those outside. And, it was difficult to get people to understand. Some people obviously, we're in the hobby and doing bioactive, but getting the the vast majority of people at shows to understand what we were doing was really difficult. And now we're to the point where people come up with lists and they go, I need this and this and this and this, and I got these enclosures that I need to fill. And so we have people on both ends of the spectrum. We have people who are really into bioactive and they just need bioactive cleaners. And then they really enjoy the isopods that they get. And then they start keeping just to keep isopods. And then you have people who are keeping them just as pets to enjoy them. And the fact that there's such a big overlap with the reptile community, I think is very beneficial for isopod keeping. Because, reptile keepers are just Pokemon trainers. So you got to catch them all. And if you already have a dedicated room to your reptiles, well, now you can add a little stack of isopod bins or whatever, and it just grows from there. So yes, I think it will continue growing and reach a lot of people.
I think so too. I think it'll keep going and going. I think that there's going to be peaks and valleys to anything. The financial market certainly has an impact to all of that, but we'll always have new species. We'll always have new Beanie Baby or Pokemon cards to collect. But always, like you said, Rachel, behind everything is that whole bioactive thing that will keep isopods in everybody's forefront in their vision.
And more people are starting to really, want to go naturalistic setups for their reptiles.
Oh, my.
Keep them better than we have before. Try to make it as natural and healthy as possible. So, I'm just such a big fan of bioactive, and I'm really glad that everybody else, or not everybody else, but so many other people are really going that route. I think it's just better for the animals, and I think it's better for the keepers too.
Tails Reptiles says, what kept you going in the hobby keeping isopods, even during the hard time?
Hold on. I didn't get a turn on the last one.
Well, you don't get a turn on every one.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you do. Chris, you do too. I stole the mouse. I've got the mouse.
Go ahead, Chris.
When you talked about, the exact question was how we're going to see this hobby grow.
Yeah.
Well, and this is definitely not me tooting my own horn. It's just basically me planting seeds. I'm going to say it was before the pandemic. So we're talking 2019 or so. I was down and I spoke in Florida, and I spoke at one of the aquarium societies, or two aquarium societies, I don't remember. But I was shuttled around by one of my very dear friends, Miss Sandy Moore. And Sandy Moore is probably the most powerful woman in the world in aquatics, in tropical fish. But she is also the president of Seagrass Farms.
Oh.
And she asked me, because I stayed at her house, and she asked me, and she said, would you do a talk for my staff on Friday? I says, I'll do anything you want, whatever you want. But I didn't really realize how big it was going to be. And I said to her, I says, well, what, this is unprepared. What do you want me to talk about? Says, you can do whatever you want. I says, well, can I introduce them to some new things outside of the world of what you're thinking? Says, you can do whatever you want. So I introduced him to isopods. And I is directly related to the fact that isopods have all of a sudden appeared in PetSmarts. That has been directly related to all of that. Same thing as that they've directly expanded into terrarium plants, bromeliads, and things like that. Now, the problem being is there's a ton of negatives involved with that, because the minute, you guys know as well, is the minute you sell a culture, it is out of your control, right?
Yeah.
Seagrass does not handle any of the cultures whatsoever. They have somebody in Florida, I don't remember who it was. You guys probably know who I'm talking about. And they're the ones that reproduce and replicate these isopods, and then they sell them in these sustainable cultures. But the problem is, once they hit the mass market, nobody looks at them whatsoever. They put them on the shelf, and it may as well be a bottle of shampoo. But that is directly, to me, that is the one facet of the way that we're going to get it to explode. But it'll never be the Marilynella tricolor. It'll never be the rubber duckies. It'll never be Hoffman Segai. It'll be those 5 or 10 basic bread and butter tetras. Wally knows what I'm talking about. It's going to be those basic aquarium fish version of isopods that are going to get those new hobbyists involved at that really, really low price for a starter culture. And that, to me, is the only way that, I know there's lots of people in the chat, they're going to disagree with that, but mass is the only way to really grow something to mainstream. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It does have tons of hiccups. You guys all know that. But it's definitely, that's what's been transpiring since about 2019. And I know that I see posts all the time like, oh, I just saw this at PetSmart and it's all dried out. I see those things all the time. I don't know how to solve those things. It's just a matter of, and I'm not directly involved. I just planted the seed. I said, this could be the next wave,
Good point. And just like you're saying, you go into any chain fish store and you're going to see the 10 or 12 staples in every single tank from store to store to store. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Chris. Tails Reptiles. What kept you going in the business with isopods even during the hard time? I
have nothing to offer. I'm not a seller.
All right. Rachel, your turn.
Sure thing. Well, I enjoy keeping them. That's how I got into this, and I keep them because I enjoy them. So, getting to sell them, that's an added bonus.
My answer is babies. And anytime I go down and I'm keeping, especially as something that I haven't bred before, and I see babies, or something that I've bred before, like Bolivare, and then at the end of the season, all the adults are dead and the babies are coming back and living, and then they have babies. That keeps me going in the hobby. Just seeing babies.
Finding babies never gets old. It doesn't
Ever.
matter how long you've been doing it, how many you have. Finding babies is always the best thing.
Never
I'm
ever.
agreed 100%.
What? You don't have to change their diapers?
No, nothing.
Right.
They're easy.
Right.
Angie wants to know: do you guys forge for anything for your isopods?
I
Angie,
do a
you
little.
do it for Wally.
I have a crew. I have employees that haven't been working lately in the last couple of years finding me stuff.
And don't get paid.
Yeah, I don't pay them. Sorry, Rachel.
No, you're good. I do a little bit. I'll collect up wood, real soft rotted wood. I don't have time to do leaves personally to the scale that I need them, but I'll collect up wood and stuff because we have property here. So when we get a tree that goes down, that's always exciting for the isopods.
Crystal just reminded me the other day of the house that we stopped at the end of the neighborhood to ask them if we could pick their leaves off their tree a couple of years ago.
Dead tree sitting on the curb that they had cut down.
Full of leaves.
Yep.
All right. Next question. I just moved my thing here and now I got to find them. Which isopods do you think, in your opinion, reproduce the fastest?
Oh,
Dairy cow.
you say dairy cow. Chris, what do you say?
There's a
Oh,
lot
I'm
of
not
them.
on the
Armadillo officinalis to me, or Armadillidium espagnoli are the ones that are like, okay, just slow down, guys. Like, it's just crazy right now. Any of the Klugii types, like it's just nonstop.
Oh, really?
Now he's drinking
Rachel,
out of the same jar.
is that your leaky water that you're drinking from?
Sorry?
Every time you pick that up, I worry that you're drinking the leech.
No, this is my
Yeah.
iced tea and Jim Beam. And
I was going to say.
but I also have the exact same container.
Yeah, we know.
It's concerning. It's concerning, Chris.
Now because it's got a swollen belly.
Just put them away.
I'm still bleeding.
I know.
I see that. Your towel was like red. You should have bought a red towel.
They don't offer a coagulating agent when they pop off.
No.
It bleeds for a little bit.
Okay. So what
Like
brings
you guys
the
have never
quickest-
kept you never
Yeah,
been
so-
to leaf before.
So isopods, yeah. So a lot of the stuff that we were talking about earlier for basic bioactive cleanup crews, and like you said, Nanette, dairy cows, you blink and you have 100 more, and then the dwarf whites, the powders, and canyons definitely would be top tier breeders.
I would say probably not breeding the fastest, but the one that will surprise you with the most because you didn't see it coming is turn over a log, take a handful of substrate, and you'll find a bazillion giant canyons.
Yeah, because their babies burrow. A lot of times I'll have people that tell me, I've got these canyons and they're not doing anything. They're not breeding. And go dig around. And then they come back and they go, yep, they were there. Tons of babies.
I'm not like
Yep.
Rachel. I don't have more and more and more. To me, it's got to be something that's going to really intrigue me to bring home a new isopod. And I don't want to tell either of you this, but I'm about to leave to the States. I'm speaking at the convention in July in Madison. Yes. Wally knows about that.
Yes.
And I'm looking online. I'm sending Amazon.com stuff because it's way cheaper than Canada. I'm sending stuff to a friend in Madison. I got so much stuff coordinating. And I'm like, okay, let's look at emerald roaches. They're illegal in Canada. Oh, yeah, it's too expensive. Let's look at centipedes. It's too expensive. I've been looking at isopods. I've been looking at all sorts of stuff because I'm driving down, which is bad. That's really bad because I can bring anything I want back. You guys are crazy. You
don't have a concern with bringing them across the border?
No. Basically, I know all the laws really, 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 really well because I look like, right? I look like an old biker, basically, right? And I have a Nexus card, which is basically a passport issued by your government, the U.S. government, as a trusted traveler. So to me, when I cross the border, if I'm going to use my Nexus card, I declare absolutely everything. And I will just sit there and go, I'll pull over and they take me inside and I will go through all their binders and discuss everything with them. No problem. I have no problem. I know what's legal and what's not legal.
Makes sense.
Bringing isopods in is not necessarily illegal. It's the soil that is
Yes.
more concerned. So like when I travel and I go down to the States and I buy tropical fish, or I bring back tropical fish from a show, and I know that it's going to raise questions. This is bad that this is live. I will literally go to the guy that I'm staying at, shrub, and pick leaves off the ground or pine cones or anything like that to bring them back and declare them as botanicals, because there's a checklist when you enter Canada. There's one little things. Do you have any fruit, vegetables, meat, dairy products, wood products? I check yes. Well, that's immediately a red flag to customs. They have no idea. Nobody checks that. Why would you check that? So I check that and I go through it. It says, well, I have 7 tropical fish, such and such, and I have some leaves. And then that's all they concern themselves about, because they're worried about soil nematodes. But that's my background, right? So I understand what it is. I know how to work within the limits of what it is. I'm not trying to keep anything illegal. I won't bring back anything that's illegal, but I know what the legalities are and everything. Totally derailed your thing. I'm sorry. I wasn't.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Good luck. Absolutely.
Yes. Haley wants to know, she has 2 questions. Do powder blues like to burrow? And is hickory and oak blend of wood pellets, is that safe for your isopods?
100%. No problem for the wood pellets.
I would say that there's probably, I think when I started, everything was pellets, add pellets. And that was the recipe that I started with substrate. I don't use wood pellets anymore. Going back, watch Chris's video, and Rus has great videos, but throw in the white rotting soft wood instead of pellets in there, and it's just more usable, quicker.
Well, more importantly to that, Wally, is in defense to all of us, is the fact that you, Rachel, Rus, and myself, we've all been in this game for about 4 or 5 years, and we've all evolved. I used to sterilize all my leaves, cork barks, slabs, everything. I would take over my wife's kitchen while she was at work one day, and it would smell like the forest. And I did that religiously. But now, as we've evolved as keepers, and Rachel even more so, because she mentioned that she does a lot of millipedes and stuff. Millipedes need that white wrought wood and all that stuff. Like one question I sent to the chat, and again, I don't want to derail, is I wanted to know really what everybody's thoughts was, or more, not necessarily thoughts, but more discussion about who uses things like components like flake soil. This is, to me, flake soil is a major, major component. To us in North America, we look at it as new, but into Europe, any of the guys over in Europe, I was in Europe in 2008 for Interzoo, or 2007 for Interzoo, which is an industry trade show. And somebody asked about Super Zoo in Vegas. That's another industry trade show that's only open to industry people. But I went to that one in Germany, and there was probably 6 vendors selling those giant rhinoceros beetles and stag beetles. But I'm not talking like the ones we see here in North America. I'm talking like ones that are the size of your hand. And these things all live off of like rotting wood and all this stuff. So these guys have worked with that type of a product for decades, long before we have. So it seems new to us now, but it's not necessary. But like, do we all do that stuff? Like, to me, I can't. Wally, you can't. You live in a northern climate, whether you want to or not. You live, you're only a few hours south of us. The same, and Ohio's not that far south. Like we could say, let's make flake soil. We could do it in those 4 summer months that we have in the backyard. But after that, we can't. Kevin Nassar or whatever his name is, he's a great, incredible hobbyist. He makes it year round. He lives in Florida. Of course he can. But like you're literally fermenting product to break it down, to get it to that level. But if we talked about in that video of the substrates, if you buy white, or you go and source some of these raw materials yourself, the white wrought wood and things like that, you can inoculate your substrates that you already have with these products and kind of speed up the process a little bit.
Yes. Rachel, do you use flake soil, to Chris's point?
I do a little bit. The product that I use for my substrate is has a lot of that built into it. And I actually started using that because of the millipedes, because they were really thriving on that. So it is built into that. I do want to go back to the pellets though.
Yeah.
While I agree, it's not really something that you need to add to the substrate. It is really good if you end up with substrate that's too wet and you need to get moisture out of it. Because you can put those dry pellets in and they'll actually suck the moisture out and expand. So I've done that a couple of times when I had like a bin that got too wet and I couldn't just like move things out of it. So.
And using Kevin's recipe, that is literally the basis for his recipe, is using those pellets, the wood stove pellets. And he uses, he doesn't use flour. He uses something else, wheat something or other. And he has all these components that he mixed together and he literally ferments it in his backyard. I've grown up making beer since I was a kid. These are things I do not want in the house. These are just certain things for family harmony. Nanette, earmuff. Yeah, just do that right now. You don't want these things in the house. They just stink. It's like yeast and all these components. They're gonna reduce. Bad. It's bad stuff.
I completely agree.
Component, it's worthwhile, right? But like to me, there's no way. Rachel, so I'm assuming you buy it, you don't make it?
No, I don't make it.
I'm the same way. To me, I want to sell orange springtails. They've been kind of eking by for a year. And I've looked at some of the people that do it really, really, really well. And they say,
are you guys losing Chris also?
He's slowing down. Yeah.
I say he's a loser. Loser.
You're breaking up. You're breaking
up, Chris. You're breaking up.
Go ahead.
But I use to me, I want to use flake soil for those orange springtails. And then I want to feed them a higher protein diet. And the other key is a lot more ventilation, which brings us back to a lot of those species that we were talking about before, like the Marullinellas. They're very challenging. They need hot, wet, but airy. It's not something we can do in Wisconsin. It's not something we can do in Canada or Ohio. You know, it's very challenging to do wet, hot, and airy.
I've used flake soil in the past. The problem is it's so expensive. I don't want to make it myself. I don't have the time. I don't want to keep the materials. I don't want to buy the materials and then keep them. But the one thing that I'll throw in, then I'll let you go ahead with the next question, is that be careful where you're getting your flake soil from. Please, please, please. There's a couple of good vendors. Chris, you mentioned one. Another is Sean Kramer. U.S. Invertebrates, good flake soil, but if you buy it from a not so reputable vendor and then change half of your isopods and it's bad flake soil, you're going to lose half your isopods. He said out
I
of
think
experience.
the problem you're going to be faced with this new buzzword. It's like in dog food, like homeopathic and all these new words that come out all the time. It's like flake soil's the new thing for isopods. You're going to have everybody wanting to sell it, and they will rush it, or they will cheapen it, or they'll do everything. And like you could totally see that happening in the American trade.
Yep.
Buy it from a trusted source is a huge component.
Yes.
What is your favorite or most active isopod for display enclosure?
Zebras.
Yep. I was thinking the same thing.
Did we say it enough times yet?
Yeah. Powder orange.
Vanilla tricolor, without question. I've never had an isopod that is out active all the time, and my culture is totally struggling. I've probably had 10 comments on my page asking me to do a video about caring for them, and I'm like, I just can't. I have like 9 individuals and babies right now in a big Exoterra, but like when they were thriving, they are out all the time. They are everywhere. But they are one that I kind of got to treat like a tropical gecko. They need to have, or a dart frog even. They need to have warm, moist, airy, and like mist or fog all the time. And I just have to make some adjustments to the way I care for them. Because if I go away for a week and a half, I lose half the culture. But I've never dealt with an isopod that is that active and out and about. Never.
Mine is zebras are out. Mine is powder orange. I'm going to grab this question first here. Do isopods eat like fruit? I don't ever feed fruit ever, simply because of what Rachel said earlier. Moist, damp, not enough ventilation is going to cause mold. It's going to cause mites. It's going to cause problems. So I stay away from fruit because I know exactly how much vegetable to put into an enclosure, how many isopods, how much vegetable. It gets eaten in a couple, 3 days, and fruit will sit there and it will mold if it doesn't get eaten, I think, faster than vegetables.
I agree with you. The thing I would probably add to that is I'd say there's no, like, again, to that same comment I brought it before, is like, stop spoiling these things. Just leave them the hell alone. But if you're cutting up a mango, like somebody said, and you've got a little 4-inch piece of peel, throw it in your isopod bin. It's not going to hurt them. But like, don't go out of your way going, oh, look, dragon fruit at the store today. I'm going to buy that and treat all my isopods. Stop. Just leave them the hell alone.
My isopods deserve the best. I'm going to buy that passion fruit no matter what you say, Chris.
I said dragon fruit.
Oh.
Dragon fruit, Wally.
I had passion on my mind.
$8, Wally.
I thought of you and I had passion fruit on my mind. Sorry. Go ahead.
Those side note that what was the other fruit he just mentioned? Not passion,
Dragon.
The other dragon fruit. $7 a piece the other day in the grocery store.
Well, they're $8 up here in Canada. That's what I'm getting at. It's like, oh, I'm going to try this. So like when we talked about it before, it's like one of the questions Nanette had was, what do you guys feed your isopods? Well, to me, one of the thoughts I thought about doing more from the scientific side is all the stupid stuff. Like, there's so much stupid stuff out there. Like, to me, I could take Repashy. It's a brand name, but I could take any other foods and I could go on Wish and order little tiny molds like cheeseburgers, and I could make Wish cheeseburger Repashies, and I could feed cheeseburgers. That might be a great YouTube video, but like, it doesn't make a difference. These are things that eat like leaf litter and like all those micro things that are in the soil. Stop spoiling them. They don't want a giant slab of watermelon. It's just no, just stop.
So I have dragon fruit and I have cheeseburgers, and I'm going to put Cheese Whiz in here too, and I'm going to do a video on all 3 of those.
Perfect.
But Rachel's the one that she answered it 100%. Every one of these things that we're going to add into that, whether it's fun or not, and it's good video or not, is will they offer nutrition to the animal? Yes, they will. However, the benefits and the cons far exceed the benefits. The introduction of all sorts of other things that you're not expecting, there's going to be a problem. The amount of gnats and fruit flies you're going to have from one thing, like, oh, I got a banana peel, I'm going to give it to my isopods. Well, your wife's going to hate that. I will tell you that now. Your wife is going to be mad as hell if you don't have a catchy. I'm not sponsored.
I tried hard-boiled egg one time because I had a lot of extra eggs. 0 out of 10 do not recommend. Don't do that. That was really gross.
Question on the screen.
Yeah.
What people in the hobby have you not yet been able to meet in person that you'd like to?
Oh.
There's only one. Oren. I think all of us would agree if you've never met him. That's the godfather of isopods. There's nobody else.
Oren is local to me. I see him on a monthly basis. And the first time, but I got to tell you this story. Okay, so the first time I met Oren, I was at a show, and I didn't know what he looked like. And he comes up to my table and he just starts talking to me like he's a normal person. And he says a couple things to me while we're talking, and in my brain I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Oren. And I like asked him what his name was, and he goes, oh, I'm Oren. And then I just completely fangirled and nerded out and showed him like my care guide where I like referenced his books, and he was super cool about it, and he left, and my husband still makes fun of me for it. So but he's a really cool guy, and yeah, I see him quite frequently and talk to him in a functional person way now. So it's great.
Nobody will get this, but I'm thinking of the Saturday Night Live skit with Chris Farley and Paul McCartney. Remember that time that I met you, Oren? Yeah, that was cool. just nerding out so much.
Yeah.
I get little drool forming.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to sound super irrelevant, but like I used to, before it became commercialized and a big company came into Winnipeg, where I used to live. I live about 40 minutes east of Winnipeg in the country. But before then, the guy that used to put on the massive Comic-Cons used to hire me every year to handle all the big stars because he knew that I wouldn't be a fanboy. So I've dealt with William Shatner and Picard and the guy from Hellboy, Sons of Anarchy. I've dealt with all these people. They're just people. You know what I mean? They're just people. I've dealt with all these people. It's like, what do you need? You want a drink or something? You're good. You're like, it's whatever. You're like, they're just people.
I know. There was a time
Like,
a couple months ago.
like there's nobody else in North America. He would be without question generalized. He's very general. Like if you were to say, oh, who's the guy for Armadillidium or who's the guy for Pacilio? Like, I don't even know. And this is the thing that's the most exciting from a scientific standpoint for me, being a botanical background and a ichthyological background. It's like, you guys have no idea how much of a roller coaster isopods could be if someone in the scientific community says, hey, I'm going to deal with isopods. You guys have no idea how bad it's going to be. You will be broken up into so many different species and genres and all sorts of stuff. It'll be traumatic. And Wally knows exactly what I'm talking about from the fish standpoint. Like the fish world, when they changed a genre and it isolated certain species, people lost their freaking mind. It was crazy. People were like losing their mind over something. Like, there's no way he can do this. And fish sat in limbo for 28 years waiting to be redescribed as something else. And that's exactly what will happen. The isopods in general are an absolute disaster from a scientific standpoint. They need to be gutted and like somebody needs to look at them. There's so much stuff coming out. Somebody posted earlier, somebody posted one of the comments earlier. It was like, anybody keep such and such. And I'm looking at it and I had to look it up and it was something Hoffman Segai, but totally unrelated to Hoffman Segai. And it looks almost like the Tormentosa, the dwarf white. And I'm like, oh, what is that? I've never even heard of that before, but that's exactly the stuff that someone like me gets intrigued by and has to look it up. But it doesn't matter. It's not going to be mainstream with us. Nobody cares.
And not that this will answer a lot of those questions, but I've been posting recently on Facebook that we'll have on the Supreme Gecko channel, a little, self plug here. We're going to have Carlos from APHIS, and he's going to answer a lot of questions about permits in the U.S. Sorry, Chris. And this is going to be fascinating. He's not going to talk about the genetics and the different species, but he's going to have a couple of points that when I talked to him earlier, just blew my mind on why and when with these permits. So stay tuned for that, folks, because
the reality for you guys is that everybody's been brown boxing into the States, not you guys intentionally. Yeah. But there's been lots of individuals that have been what we call brown boxing. Brown boxing basically means they're going online to some random person that they met on Facebook and just shipping random isopods at an incredibly discounted price direct to their home through the mail. And brown boxing is bad. Brown boxing overall is bad for the hobby, but a lot of them have done it.
Yeah. It has the same connotation as in the reptile community as a flipper.
What if I say I'm going to import a corn snake from Asia, but it's a Komodo dragon, but I just put the different name on it, so you said it's okay? Like, and I don't want to sound disrespectful, and it's not my intention, but like literally, you guys know that I'm traveling to Madison, Wisconsin to speak, and I'm going to drive by, and I'm going to cross the border in North Dakota, and they're going to literally ask me I'm going to tell them what I have. They're going to pull me into the office, and they're going to pull out a binder. Well, the binder's not going to be updated with any nomenclature that's relevant in the past 10 years. And I could tell them whatever I want, but I won't. I will update them and tell them exactly what it is, because I'm passionate and I love the hobby that we have, but like they don't have the tools available to deal with it. They just don't. And that's why the brown boxing exists.
You got
They can call it whatever they want. Everybody knows in the trade, the isopod trade, you just label as Miralunella or Cubaris, it's good. Doesn't matter what it's called now. And that's wrong to me.
100% agree.
All right, guys, our last question for the night, which I totally neglected at the beginning. I'm sorry, Major. I totally missed it.
You're fired.
I went all the way back through the chat and found it.
Okay.
So do springtails only eat mold or can they eat decomposing leaves? Lots of conflicting, I can't see the rest, info out there.
Wally, go ahead.
I don't know for sure. I know they eat mold, obviously, and I think that they're instrumental in anybody's isopod culture for that purpose alone. I have to think that if they don't have the mold to eat, they're probably going to eat decaying material. Will they eat live leaves? From everything that I've read, I don't know for sure. Decomposing leaves, yes. Mm-hmm. Live, no. That's my understanding.
100%.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they'll break down larger waste just a lot slower than isopods would do. But like if you're keeping them, with other invertebrates and stuff, I mean, they break down all sorts of stuff, and I find a lot of them do better, with leaves anyway.
Perfect.
Not just think about it. So like look at it from an ecological standpoint. Both Rachel and Wally are 100% correct. But think of it from an ecological standpoint. These are animals that are smaller, they're microscopic, and they break down products even smaller for other, not necessarily animals, but other things to break them down even smaller.
Mm-hmm.
But it also depends on the species of springtail that we're dealing with. Carambola, yes. Or is it carambola is the white or the peach or any of those basic springtails that are in the trade, those type of ones, that is exactly what they will target. But there's certain species that will target other things. But like exactly, they are slightly smaller than an isopod. Isopods break things down. Springtails are one chain down from that. They break things down even more so that the higher forms of things like plants and stuff like that can break them down further and upkeep them and release them back to the environment.
I have a question for you too. I know, yeah, great question. I know you said last.
Yep.
But I'm going to treat this as our last. Any issues with springtails with isopods? Do you find that, oh my gosh, there's too many springtails, they're going to impact my isopods in any manner whatsoever?
No, you can never have too many springtails. I mean, springtails are fantastic. If you have a lot of springtails, it means they've got a lot of food to eat. But I keep them in everything. I keep them in everything. All my isopod bins, all of my anything that's moist. All my other invertebrates. If there's moisture in something, I want to have springtails in it.
Perfect. Kristen, same thing.
I understand. Rachel is spot on. Like I'll use some of my Cubaris type isopod bins that I maintain. Like I'll inoculate them exactly the same way, but because they're warmer and they're wetter, the springtail populations explode. And I'll lift up certain shelters that I've put within it, like I'll put coconut husk or anything like that. I'll lift it up, and there won't be a single Cubaris in that, but the whole thing would just be crawling with springtails. But can they outcompete? I honestly, I'm a very firm believer that a lot of these animals, springtails, isopods, will self-regulate to within their environment. They're not going to go to the point where they're going to kill themselves off. Yep. Because they're not sustainable. The environment can't sustain them. Yeah, we still have very much a hand in controlling those aspects, be it with their environments and stuff like that, especially when we're keeping them in the tub. And they give us a fair bit of, not necessarily flexibility, but they give us a fair bit of, I don't know what the word is, but you guys know what I'm talking about, is they give us a fair bit of warning before the entire environment's going to crash.
Yep.
So we have a fair window with us to attack or address the problem, so to speak.
I never ever thought that springtails. I still think that you probably can't have too many springtails, but I tell you what, I I was doing a video on Persillio boulevare and springtails all over the place. And I went back to watch it to edit it for a video. And I saw one boulevare just kind of, doing this, flicking off springtails off of it. I thought, I've seen that with geckos where you've got a cricket or, something that crawls on them and they just kind of flick it off. I thought, I wonder if it bothers them if there's too many springtails. I don't worry about it. It's not going to keep me up at night, but there's just something there that maybe if there's too many, it might bother them. I don't know. In nature, it certainly doesn't.
I'll probably also notice that the warmer, wetter enclosures have more springtails.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Certainly. Yep.
Like how, I know I'm going to digress for a second, but Rachel and Wally, how do you guys keep your springtails?
Huge.
Go ahead, Wally.
I think that, I've gotten away from the charcoal so many years ago. I hate seeing pictures of charcoal, springtails on charcoal so much.
I'm going to do a video of springtails on charcoal tomorrow.
I won't watch it. So the next phase is I'll just, you keep springtails on dirt just like you would isopods. That's a good way.
Or on charcoal. Charcoal works great.
Charcoal does work great. I agree, Chris.
Off the screen. God dang it. So
Rachel, buds right there, Rachel.
There we go.
So I'll go with the method that I use, and I'll use a 15-quart, lots of sphagnum moss, maybe a couple, 3 inches deep, and then pieces of bark sitting right on that sphagnum moss. We'll lift up the sphagnum moss, throw fish flake or some other, powdered food in there, and maybe a vegetable, put it right back down. So when we're ready to harvest, I take up that bark and I take a 19-quart and I just hit it on the side, and we get bazillions of springtails. The other way is
that you can buy like a bottle. You can go to like any of your home places and buy a bag of lump charcoal. I don't know what it costs in the States, probably $8. We'll say $8. You can buy a 20-pound bag of lump charcoal and you can smash it up and make it smaller. You can make 4,000 springtail enclosures on charcoal for $8. Or, as Wally put it, he's going to put his organic flake soil with freshly harvested and organically raised
that remove button?
Sphagnum moss and treat them like they're little individual children, and he'll get thousands that way.
Chris, what?
So I keep all my big master cultures for just the regular white springtails. I keep them on charcoal. There's some of the specialty species. You definitely got to keep them on substrate. They just I cannot get them to thrive on charcoal. And then I do some clay cultures too, but for just mass quantity of, the selling them and getting nice clean cultures out to people. I like charcoal. It's easier and cleaner for me.
Chris left. Hurry.
Take her off too.
Hurry. Chris left. Hurry up.
Everybody's gone. No charcoal.
Chris is leaving because he's got to go to the ER because he's got all the blood falling out of his hands.
He's probably dizzy from. That's why he likes charcoal more, because the blood loss and.
Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Any more questions?
No,
Nanette?
that was it. I think I got them all.
Okay.
I hope. If not, I'm sorry.
I'm going to throw up J-Bugs real quick there. So she's saying I read not to use charcoal, but I could be wrong. I'm just going to throw it out there, just like Rachel said. Everybody is different. Everybody has a preference. It doesn't, again, like I said in the very beginning, no rights, no wrongs. Listen to a lot of people and make your own judgments. That's, all that I can say. There's going to be a lot of different opinions on a lot of different stuff in the hobby. In reptiles and in amphibians and birds and horses and goats and isopods, there's going to be a bazillion different opinions. Get a few different people that you can talk to, and then ultimately, ask them the questions, and then ultimately make the choice yourself. So
yeah, and do some science too. If you have two options, set up two things the same way, but using different products or whatever, and see what works better for you personally.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. Try it out yourself and come back to us and tell us, yeah, Wally, you stink. Your answers stink. That's not how you do it, dummy.
I
Oh,
always
yeah.
ask people. I always ask people at shows too. Because we get a lot of. I don't keep everything, and so I'll make the best recommendation I can. And sometimes I'll ask people to say, "Hey, let me know how this works out for you," because I want to be able to then take that information and give it to the next person who asked me about this. So
Absolutely. We'll do the same thing. Here's what I'm saying, but go ahead and try it and come back to me. Come back to me, in a month or two and let me know how it worked for you. Folks, any last... I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I see a lot of the comments and stuff. People move from different things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I bought an original white and peach springtail culture in a little tiny deli cup. They're right here behind the door here. It's like 2 feet away from me. They were $10 a piece about 6 years ago. And I have several other cultures, but like the original is still going. And it's on charcoal. So like to me, I have no reason to change anything. And the other ones are on charcoal. I went literally to the dollar store, Dollar General, what you guys call it. And I bought a bunch of Tupperwares and I have like 6 cultures of each going. And I can sell 20 to 30 cultures a month to the one store for $10 a piece. It's the only thing I sell is springtails. And I literally just go, shh, shh, that's it.
Yep.
Like, I'm not saying if you were a hobbyist and you've got 20 vivariums at home, that putting on Reptisoil, flake soil, whatever you want won't be better. But for me, for the purpose that I need, like these animals are like bulletproof. They don't need a lot of work.
They really don't. Yep, I completely agree. And we have tons of discussions on the clay material and charcoal. Whatever works for you. Last words, Rachel. Anything to add? I'll come
No.
back to that. Chris, last famous words.
I got nothing.
I hope you
first.
haven't lost
I'm
enough
absolutely
blood.
honored that you have me here. Like the four people, 5 people. I'm going to include Nanette, because she's really the brains behind the operation. But the
Everybody
5
knows
people
that.
that have been involved tonight, I am honored to be even amongst the group of you guys. Like every once of you people have contributed massively to this thing, and you gotta take the accolades where they come. Like honestly, you guys have sat at tables at trade shows relentlessly, and like I made $300 today. I made $4,000. It doesn't matter what the amount is. Sometimes you break even, but it's the fact that you're sitting there tirelessly promoting the hobby, promoting these animals. Rachel, are you married?
I am.
Do you have children?
I do not.
Okay, you don't have
Well,
children
goats.
yet.
I have
You guys
goats.
are goats. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I have goats.
Cows, I got
Those are
guinea
kids.
pigs, I got chickens. There's so much shit in the yard. But like the bottom line is like you guys are giving so much of yourselves to this community, to the hobby. And like you will go to a show and you will talk until you can't even talk anymore about how incredible these animals are. And every single person that's been in the chat, I don't have access to I see the chat, but I don't have access. How many people have viewed this tonight, Wally?
I think our
It says
highest
30
was about.
right now, but it went way up before.
I think we were about 40 or 45.
But you look at with the size of your channel, this is probably going to be viewed by 300 or 400 people, and it'll just continue to grow over the years. This is vastly impressive knowledge that's being shared, and we're all growing as a community because of it. So, like to me, I definitely give my hands to each of you, Russ included, for what you guys contribute to this hobby, and I'm just honored to be a part of it.
I can't thank you guys enough for doing this. This wasn't spur of the moment. Like I said in the beginning, it was thought out a long time ago. What was spur of the moment was, okay, who should be our guests? And you guys, you 3 names came up like that. I didn't even have another name. So if one of you guys would have bailed on me, I don't know, when did I ask you guys? Monday or Tuesday? If one of you said, nah, I can't make it, I would have been.
Well, the truth be told, Wally, is like normally I would be away. And normally when I'm away is when I could accommodate these things. I even told my wife this. It says, I expected to be away this week so I could handle these things because I'm literally in a hotel. But I'm literally at home and I'm sitting at the basement. My stairs are like there's a table with my laptop in front of a tub. I just put the bookcases there so it's something to look at. But my
I like that.
stairs are right there.
Perfect.
And I'm in the basement, and the whole family's gone to bed. My wife keeps sending me, "You're too loud. Shut up." Like she keeps sending me notes and stuff like that. Because I do these only when I'm on the road. I get probably asked about 8 to 10 times a month to do these things. And I love to do them. I absolutely love to do them. But it's more as whether or not it's convenient or not. But there's certain people, when they ask certain things, that I will bend over absolutely backwards to do. And those two people right over, I got to figure out where it is. It's the other way. It's right
There you
over
go. There you go.
there. Those two people, I'd do anything for. They are absolutely incredible ambassadors, as are you, Rachel, for this hobby. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
guys
Thanks
so
for,
much.
Thanks for having me on. Chris, it was
Thank
nice to like meet you and bond over charcoal.
Where are you in Ohio?
Cleveland area.
Flipping end broadcast.
I come to Strong. Do you know, you ever heard of Ohio Fish Rescue?
Yeah.
This is Big Rich. This is Mini Big Rich. He goes on adventures with me all the time. I've
Awesome.
stayed there many times. I've spoken at the Ohio Cichlid Association Convention Extravaganza in November multiple times. Like I've got some Ohio, Chicago are probably the two, and Florida are probably the two areas that I would love to go to every month if I could, for the amount of fun.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Would love to hook up with you one time when I'm coming through Ohio. I don't know if I'm going to be there this year because my travel schedule is constantly on the flux. But if I come through, there's going to be shenanigans.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me know.
Stuff. We're going to have some fun. Wally won't let me come to his house. Wally won't even let me phone.
No.
He's just weirdo.
Come on over. Let me know when you're coming over, and I will be in Illinois, in Chicago. I'll probably visit the Ohio Fish Group.
Well, I'm coming to July. In July, I'm coming to the American Cichlid Association. I'm leaving on Monday. The convention doesn't start till Thursday. I'm going to Minneapolis the first day, and I'm going to be doing some random things in Minneapolis. The next day, I'm driving the additional 6.5 hours to Madison. And on Wednesday, the 12th, Josh and myself, I'm driving from Madison to Chicago to go and see the Shed Aquarium.
Nice.
Josh really wants to go with a fish person to see this thing. And you are more than welcome, as always, my friend, to that.
That would be fun.
Thank you very much.
And then I'm heading back on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday for the convention.
Yeah, that's going to be a crazy convention. Before we leave tonight, again, thank you both. Thank you, Russ. Thank you guys for joining. This is just the first part. Hopefully we can get another couple of parts in your intermediate and advanced. And before we leave, I just want to see one last thing. Chris, can you show us the bottle and how far you've dropped it down tonight?
Which bottle?
You know
Not
the bottle.
This bottle.
Wow. And you started with a full bottle?
Big one. Sorry. and like
Oh,
no,
you even hold that bottle.
This is the mix. This was the picture of mix.
Outstanding.
And I just
On that note, we're going to go have dinner.
And
viewers, thank you very much for joining us.
This leech is sitting on the bottom, like overweight. Looks like it had Thanksgiving dinner.
Well, because it drained a lot of your blood, and
I wasn't paying attention to time, so I wasn't. The bottom line is like the animal needs to eat. It can eat whatever it wants. Like
nobody will have that on their live stream this year. I'll guarantee it, folks. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it.
Good night.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, folks.